If you were given the choice between an easy life or a hard life, it wouldn't be much of a choice. But what if the choice were between an easy but shallow life or a hard but wise life? That would be more of a choice. It says in the book of Proverbs that there's nothing better than wisdom. It's the greatest gift we can have in life. It says it's better than all riches. But if you're like me, you've probably had the thought before, I wouldn't need to be wise if things would just work out for a change. So we can talk about this choice all day, but the joke's on us. We don't get to choose. And even if we did, there's no such thing as an easy life. Even the most charmed lives, even the people who consider themselves very blessed, they have hard lives too. None of us gets out of here without challenge. We all have our share in the suffering of the world. And we're not going to understand why that is until heaven. But we can glimpse this side of heaven that it seems there are some lessons we can only learn this way. There's no other way to learn them. And we learn a lot through these very simple but clear readings today. You've heard me say before that I grew up in the country in a little hamlet called Pumpkin Hook. And it's just a little sliver of nowhere. But because of that, everyone has lots of land. So we had a huge yard, and on the edge of our property was a thick grove of trees that we just called the hedgerow. And my brother and I would often play in the hedgerow. One day I was there, and I saw on the bark of a tree what looked like a tumor. It was the same color as the bark, but when I touched it, it was like a crepe. It was like paper mache. So I don't know how old I was, maybe 8. I poked at it and poked at it. And eventually, I broke through a little bit, and I could see that there was something inside, something pink and red and glistening. So I poked at it some more. And what came out was this red and pink, glistening, wet little mass. And I could see that it had a pattern on it. And I recognized after a couple minutes that it was the pattern that you would find on the wing of a monarch butterfly or something like that. And then suddenly a little flap of wing came up. And after just a few moments, that little glistening red and pink mass fell to the ground and died. And I was young, but I was horrified, and I felt sick. That was a butterfly in a cocoon, and it was not ready to come out. In fact, I have since learned that butterflies cannot be assisted at all in coming out of their cocoon, or they will die. I'd have to be an entomologist to explain this. I don't get all of it, but evidently, a butterfly must struggle to get out of the cocoon because it is that struggle that tones its muscles, that gives it the strength that it needs, that teaches it how to be a butterfly and no longer a caterpillar. It is precisely in the struggle that the butterfly can thrive. The butterfly teaches us that there is no way to achieve certain goals without struggle. The struggle is a necessary part of the process. That's exactly what the gospel is about today. Jesus did not decide one day to go to the desert. The scriptures are clear that the Spirit drove him into the desert, set him an Uber, and had instructions. Bring this man to the desert. And he went. And it's very clear that what happened there was not pleasant. He was vulnerable, it was dangerous, he was hungry, and he was on his own. And it was for 40 days. This is obviously a story about being cast out into a very difficult place. And what was going on at home while he was there? John the Baptist was arrested. His cousin, his friend, his mentor, he was arrested and taken out of service. And so when Jesus got out of the desert, there was a lot of work for him to do. What we hear in the reading, though, is the desert for Jesus was a cocoon. Because before he went to the desert, he was a carpenter. After he got out of the desert, he was the Savior of the world. He was the one healing and preaching and teaching and casting out demons. And we hear that even for Jesus, there are no shortcuts to reaching our potential. There was no shortcut for him to be able to take on all that he was going to take on. He had to go through the desert to get there. The same is true for us. You've probably heard other versions of this gospel that are much longer, that have much more detail. Mark just cuts to the chase. But even though the gospel is very short, it is long enough for him to tell us this important detail. God sent angels to minister to Jesus while he was in the desert. And isn't that how it always is? As you look back at the desert, can you not now see the angels that were there? The angels may be a friend who takes our texts and our calls at any time. The angels may be the hospice nurse who was a stranger when he or she came to our house, but became so important to us that we couldn't avoid having them involved in the funeral. They needed to be there. Maybe the angel was the neighbor who took care of the kids while the crisis was going on, who told us not to worry, who made sure that everything was all right so that we could focus on what we needed to. This is the pattern that always happens. And we hear the reason why in the first reading. God will always be there to send consolation. Because after the great flood, the one that Noah survived, God made the promise that you heard. There will be more storms in life, but never one like that. And when the storms come, I want you to look into the storm. I want you to look at the dark clouds, and I want you to keep your eyes open for the rainbow. I'm going to put a rainbow in those dark clouds. And that rainbow is going to be clear for everybody to see, but it is going to be just for you. That's what makes that reading so beautiful. God says, I'm establishing a covenant between you and me and all living beings. So it's between all of us and God, but it's also between each of us and God. When we see a rainbow, it's for everybody, but it's also particularly for us. It means exactly what we know it means. That's why God chose such a perfect way to connect with us. So this week, we are being encouraged to take a look at the desert of our life, no matter what kind of desert that has been for us, whether we're in it now or we're looking back at one that we've been in. And we are being encouraged to see it as not just a desert, but as a cocoon, as a necessary part of our journey, as something that we could not live without, because all of the strength that we're going to use for the next phase is coming from that struggle. This is really hard for us, but it's even harder if the struggle is happening to someone we love. Parents, you know this. How many parents have tried to slit the cocoon that their kids are in so that they don't have to struggle to get out of it? How many times have we made that mistake, thinking that if we can just make it a little easier for them, that they can learn the lesson the easy way? That maybe they can still reach their full potential if they don't suffer so much. But it doesn't work like that. We have to go through our own struggle, and we have to let others go through theirs. Our job is not to save them from the cocoon. It's to be the angels that help them in the desert. We don't help if we try to spare someone from what they need to know. Because if you look back at your life, when have you learned the most in life? Was it on vacation, really? Did you really learn the most important lessons you needed to know on vacation? I wish that were true. It would give me an excuse to go more. But no, we learn the most important lessons when we're in struggle. So we got to go through the desert. Sorry, it stinks, but it's not for nothing. We are just like those butterflies. We need the struggle because the struggle is the way to our potential. It's the way to heaven. Hardships are the pathway to peace. We all want to experience the glory, but we won't get to the glory except straight through our story.